All right, welcome guys to and gals and everything in between to ACDA. Our topic this week is going to be resumes and workshops, and we have the amazing Dr. Evans leading the discussion today. Woo, yeah! All right, so without further ado, um,
Awesome.
have at it. Yeah.
So if I'm correct, you are all music ed majors, right? Okay, I wasn't sure if everyone attending would be or not. So it's mostly education focused with some other conductor stuff. So I figured I'd play to whoever is here. All right, let me share. Oh, so on the slide, I give you a link to all the documents I have. There's a handout that we'll look at a little bit tonight, but I'll project it while we're looking at it. And there's also a link to the slides in the Google Drive. So you have everything there that'll be presented for the night. Let's go with this. All right. Here we go. I'm going to get all your lovely faces back where I can see you. Yay, second monitor. Boo, getting older and bad eyesight. Okay, and boom. All right, so goal for tonight, thinking kind of holistically about how are you going to get a job. Tips for like just landing your first job as a music educator or a conductor. So I compiled these based on my own personal experiences, and then also by talking with music supervisors and administrators in this state and other states about what they're looking for when they're hiring. So it's kind of a compilation of my advice, their advice, and also some past failures to learn from. Not that I've ever done awkward things. So the first thing to think about is channeling your inner Aretha Franklin, right? So I would sing for you, but right now my throat's really sore, so ignore the bed voice. But you better think about what and where you're trying to teach. Whoa, think. Yeah, so you got so hard for the bed singing. But you have to think about what type of position you want before you begin your search. So if you know you really want to be a high school choral director, you want to start building up your resume to think about that. Or if you're like, well, I'm not sure, I might like elementary, might like middle school or high school, maybe you're aiming for a collegiate job down the road. Just start thinking about what you would like to do short term and long term, and that can help you set your goals. One of the biggest things is to make sure that you set goals to balance your time and effort in applying for jobs. It takes forever to apply for jobs. And teaching jobs take an especially long time. Maryland is one of eight states in the country where the school districts are organized by county instead of by like geographical region. That's just however they set it up. And that's good and bad. I guess the nice thing is that you can apply to certain school districts easily by going to the school district website and just searching for what positions are available. The downside though is that they all use almost the exact same application, but you have to fill it out for every single school system. So you're going to fill out the same thing over and over again. So that does take quite a bit of time. You want to think about what you're able to teach and what you're willing to teach. Sometimes those are the same. We hope that they're the same. But obviously, if you don't have experience, even though you'll be certified as a pre-K through 12 music educator for vocal general and instrumental, if you're not an instrumentalist, you probably don't want to find a job with a band. And we would like to encourage our instrumental friends to not take vocal jobs if they don't have the training, although that's more common because sometimes our instrumental friends don't realize all the pedagogy that goes into voice instruction. Being a former instrumentalist, well, I still play clarinet. I came from the instrumental music ed camp, so I had some training in vocal general, but I got a lot more after I started going to grad school. So, and then you have to think about where you want to teach. How many of you think you want to keep teaching in Maryland? Okay. Anybody thinking about teaching overseas? Okay. Anybody thinking, maybe I just want a job as a conductor or an applied teacher? Okay. Yeah. All right. Anybody thinking maybe collegiate level down the road? Okay. Cool. That gives me an idea of what you're talking about. All right. And if anybody says anything in the chat, tell me, because I can't see with 5 things open what's going on. So, all right, cool. So you really want to cast a wide net when you're thinking about where you're going to apply. So when you're looking for job vacancies, start thinking about who are all of your contacts that may hear about like potential openings. So if you're thinking about school district websites, NAFME Job Center, the ACDA website has a job search. And in the handout that I have for you in the Google Drive, it has links to all of these job centers so you know where to start looking for positions. You know, teachers2teachers.com, School Spring, looking at the Kodai Educators Association. And then the biggest one though is word of mouth. So the people that you student teach with or who you are working with, they're going to know about openings a lot of the time before they're posted. They're going to know if a colleague is retiring or if someone switched schools or what's going on. So your mentor teachers and just the people that you make connections with are going to be some of your best resources for that. Other things to think about too. No one ever thinks of it for music ed, but using our college career services office is actually really helpful. And as annoying as that is, like sometimes I feel like career centers don't always know exactly what they're talking about with musicians or music resumes, but our representative, Marcy Lightfoot, is actually very good. And she's got some great advice. She will look over your resume for you and give you feedback. So definitely take her up on that. And I've got some links to that too in your handout. Looking for job fairs, all the education job work sites, and actually, surprisingly, local newspapers, they still advertise sometimes in the classified section. So that's probably the last place I would look, but that's still, especially if you're in a rural area, sometimes they're posted there for jobs too. So some things to think about there. When you are applying for jobs then, the sooner the better, but also you want to wait till you have enough experience to have something to put on your resume, of course. So we generally recommend that people start applying for education jobs towards, you know, middle or end of their first rotation while they're student teaching. So that'll give you enough information to put who you're interning with and give references, and then they can actually talk about your skills. If you start applying in January, and the music supervisors will tell you to apply in January because they want to have a big pool of applicants, but nobody can talk about your skills yet because you haven't taught. So you can put it in there, and it's okay. You can always, you know, add stuff or email them, but usually a little bit later is better. Create an application checklist for yourself to help you keep up with everything. So a lot of jobs have the same requirements. They're usually going to want, well, we'll go into that on the next page, transcripts, you know, copying of your teaching certificate, a resume, you know, all of those things. But yeah, let's kind of look on the next one. So here's the list of things you need. It's long, I know. So most places have an online application now. So you'll just go to the county website or school district website in another state to apply. They'll usually ask for transcripts. A lot of the time you can send unofficial transcripts at first, but they always require official ones if you're hired. And one of the things that will appear on your transcript, you're going through what's called a MAP, a Maryland approved program for certification. So once you graduate, about 6 weeks afterwards, your transcript gets this fancy little MAP stamp, and that's how they know that you have met like a certification program there. You'll want to have a resume and a cover letter or an email. Cover letters aren't as prevalent now because we're submitting things digitally, but when you reach out to whoever you're applying for a job with, especially like a music supervisor and administrator, you want to write your email as if it's a cover letter, so that they kind of get that introduction that way. You'll definitely want to have letters of recommendation and references set up ahead of time, and we'll talk about that in more detail. You'll have your praxis scores and your teacher certification. If you're getting to the point, depending on where you're at in the degree, you will all be doing EdTPA portfolios too. So you want to have proof of that for your certification. Recordings of you teaching when you have permission from students are great. If you have any jobs outside of like your student teaching internships, if you have a recording of you teaching like a church choir, working with a summer music camp or anything like that, those are great to put in your portfolio. Sometimes people won't look at them all at all, and other times they will go through and look at everything in them. So you just never know. Your portfolio Go figure, the one that you started in Music Ed 111 is going to follow you through all the way through. And this has actually been something that's got a lot of our students their teaching jobs. Do any of you know Cassie Jacobs? She teaches at Lock Raven High School. Yeah, she's fantastic. She's one of our alumni, and it made me laugh because she's like, I didn't believe you would use the teaching portfolio, but my principal hired me because of mine. He even told me so. I was like, So even though it seems like a lot of busy work to go through, it really does help you show your skills and get a job. A big tip. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry. When are we like allowed to take the music praxis? Can we just take that like whenever we want?
You could, but you'll probably want to wait until your senior year after you've finished all your methods classes, because a lot of the stuff, you won't have taken it until you're through most of elementary general methods and choral methods. So, and that's totally okay to take it then. A lot of people wait to take it until their second semester. So, yeah. Passing the music content praxis is not a requirement to graduate. It is a requirement to get your certification. So technically you could wait even till the end of the school year and take it, but usually administrators like to see that you've passed it so that it's like one less thing for them to worry about if they hire you. So something to think about there.
Are you able to take it multiple times? Like if you don't pass, because I hear if you don't pass, you can't be certified.
That is true. You have to wait 21 days, I believe, in between taking it. So you want to make sure that you allow enough time, early enough so that if something happens, you'll be okay. You should be fine as long as you study. They've got great study documents, and we get a group together with the seniors, and Dr. Ciccone does a listening thing, and we do some like study guides to help everybody too. So we get that going. But a big tip from the music supervisors, when you're saving your documents, like your resume or a cover letter or anything else, please save them as PDFs and include your name, because when they open all these applications and you just call it resume, it's your resume. They open it up and it's like one of 100 that say resume and they don't know which one is yours. So you want to make sure that you're including your last name and what it is. And if you have a common name like I do, like Evans, then make sure you include your first name too. So that way they know exactly what they're looking for and can find it quickly. Also, from Jessica Valady, one of the music supervisors, she says, really think about what the documents will look like if they're printed, including the font size, the style of the font, making sure that you don't put your email address in like a really bold, hard to read font so that when it prints, it's too hard to read. A lot of the times people will print off your documents in like black and white draft format. So just check out what it looks like when you have it to make sure it looks okay if someone prints like that. So if we're gonna look at your handout quick, let me get out of here for a minute and pull up this. So this is your handout here, woohoo. One of the big things to think about with your letters of recommendation is that you really want to have typically 3 references, but they ask for anywhere from 1 to 5. You want to choose your references wisely. If you're applying for an education job, your mentor teachers and your university supervisors are a given. If they're not on your list of references, that's a really big red flag. So they'll be curious about that. Yes, your certification expires, but you have, I think, 5 years. So you have a little bit of time. Yeah, and so with the references too, it's really important to ask for permission before you list someone. And that sounds really stupid, but I know that my students are going to list me when I'm their university supervisor, but it helps me just to know that like where you're applying, because I'll usually ask which counties you're applying in. I'll ask you for your resume. And then I'll make sure that you have my updated contact information, because a lot of the time I get calls in the summer. So if people are calling my work office in the summer, it's faster for me to have my cell phone on there. So just check with that. You want to make sure that you list everyone's title correctly. Look up what their title is or ask someone to provide you with that. And make sure that you send, again, your job resume and your job description when you're applying for something. So one of our alumni just said, hey, I'm applying for a job in Anne Arundel County for a choral job. Can you write me a reference? And that really helped me because I knew how to tailor the wording for it. If I know that that person's applying for a choral job versus an elementary general job, I'll definitely write the letter differently. So that helps to have them know that too. Have a variety of references. You want people who can talk about your skills, obviously as a choral musician, but also as an educator. You might want to have someone who can talk about just your, like, a personality character reference in general too. So you kind of want to have a mix of those. If you have any of those jobs outside that are education related too, then definitely think about who you could have that. Like if you work for a church or if you work for a summer camp, those are great references too. If you work teaching applied lessons for a studio or just on your own, having a letter from a parent or a student can be a nice thing to throw in there too. So you can get letters from your professors. They can be great, but those are kind of secondary to like your mentor teacher and your university supervisor for your internship. It helps to make a letter of recommendation checklist so that you can remember who you've asked for what. And that kind of sounds silly, but sometimes we need reminders. I get several hundred requests to write recommendations when the spring hits. So once in a while, I might need a reminder to say like, hey, Dr. Evans, did you remember Anne Arundel County? And so that helps make sure that I'm not missing them too, and never feel bad about reminding someone, which can help. The other reason you want to ask someone to be a reference and tell them what's coming is also because a lot of the time, the school district's generated reference thing they send out goes to our junk mail. So we never know that it comes sometimes if it doesn't come right, if we don't know what to look for it. So for your resume then, I've got examples in here, but the Career Center actually has some pretty good examples for you too. Just a reminder to save it as a PDF again, and we'll look at those in a second. But before we go there, I'll show you the sample resume we have in here. So for your resume checklist, you want to have your biographical information. How are people going to get a hold of you? So your name, your address. If it's a publicly posted resume, you don't need to put your whole street address. You can just put like Towson, Maryland, and that's enough. Phone number, anything like that. When you're putting your email on there, also think about your email that you have for professional email. The one that my university generated when I was first applying for jobs was Simon1KL, and that seemed great at first, except the L and the 1 looked the same in most fonts, so no one could tell what my email address was unless they copied and pasted it. So it looked like Simon1K1 to a lot of people. So I missed some emails because of yay university email. So it helps to set up one that has your first name and last name. So, Kate Simon 78 or whatever it's going to be. One of my students sent one up that was like Coco Clavier, and I was like, well, that's cute, but not the most professional. Just like my husband when he's applying for jobs, I heard him just come plowing through the door with my daughter. But he's like Raven fan 79. I was like, no. Like, really? Like I present on this nationally, really? So it made me laugh. But yeah, definitely make sure that you have your name as part of your email. Just makes it a little bit easier to find you. All right, so for your education, definitely list your school, most recent degree at the top, going down as you earn more degrees. If you've earned an associate's, if you came from a community college, list it on there too, that's great. It doesn't matter so much if you put your GPA on, they're gonna have your transcripts. I would say only include your GPA if it's higher than like a 3.6 or 3.7, because otherwise they'll just use that to knock you out of the running if there's other people with higher GPAs. So you don't want to give them like fodder if yours isn't your strongest point when you have other strong suits. Thinking about that too with professional experience then. So usually there'll be a section for professional experience or teaching experience. You'll want to have a job title, what was it you were doing, the school that you worked for and the dates of employment, and then a brief description of duties. Most recent CV or resume tips say to use present tense verbs for current positions that you still hold, and then past tense for things that were, previous positions. There's a nice link on the Towson website for some power verbs to use that make you sound like you have active roles. So instead of saying, well, actually, I'll just go on here. Come over here, too many screens. All right, did it even open? No, that's okay. All right, so they have a power verb thing that links to where I put that on there, and I'll worry about that later. But the other part I wanted to show you on here are their sample resumes are actually quite good too. So they have sorted out by college. So the thing that's a little weird, they don't have a music education resume. So you probably want to look under the College of Education one to see their sample. And it's going to look a lot like the music one that I just showed you too. Making sure everything's really clear. It doesn't need to be fancy. It needs to be easy to see sections quickly. So when you're applying for a lot of jobs, you want to make sure that you have headings that are very clear and show where things are, and that you have kind of a similar format for everything. So normally we say don't use caps, right? It looks like you're yelling. It's okay for a resume. You're not yelling memberships, that's totally fine for a heading like that. You can see here, they give examples where they worked, time, all of that stuff. And then, plan, teach, and assess. These are all the things you did. So you might list this many things, or you might just list like 2 or 3 for each one, because this one's pretty long. If you have less experience and you need to take up more room, then you can be a little bit more verbose here. But if you're trying to keep it down to 1 page, then you might want to just limit it to a couple. So they've got their example here, all their education things, other related experience. So if you were a substitute teacher, a summer camp counselor, if you taught swim lessons, anything like that is great to put in that related experience. Cheerleading student volunteer. I was an assistant wrestling coach for the middle school. Yeah, whatever. Odyssey of the Mind coach. So, put in stuff like that, whatever's going to help you with your job. So let me go back. Let's close that. Okay, so in terms of work experience, if you don't have a ton of experience, if you're thinking about what you've got for your resume by the time you're getting through student teaching, you'll have 2 practicum placements for elementary, actually 3. 3, one for elementary, one for middle school, one for high school in the fall of your senior year. And then you'll also have an elementary and a secondary full-time internship for your student teaching. So that's 5 positions you can list on there already. So that's going to fill up some space. If you find that you still need, if you have like a lot of blank space, or if you go on to a second page, generally, if you are on a second page of a resume, you don't want to have just like a third of the page, you want to fill it up. So you could put in additional work experience. This sounds kind of silly, but I actually put that as a McDonald's manager because I worked there from the time I was 16 all the way through college and back again in grad school. And that was one of the reasons that my first teaching job decided to hire me, as silly as that is. She said that she saw that I stuck with the same job for year after year and was dedicated and worked up through the system. And so she thought that that was a good quality. So go figure, McManager helped me get my first music job. Yay, would you like fries with your glockenspiel? But yeah, so any honors and awards that you have, if you don't have any, just eliminate that. But if you've won any other scholarships or anything, make sure that you put those on there. If you're a member of professional organizations like ACDA or NAFME or other things like that, you would want to list those in there as well. This is if you have room to fill. So extracurricular interests do not have to go on there. But if you're trying to get like to that second page or something, that's where you can say, well, I'm into computer programming or wrestling or whatever. Why might you want to list those on a resume? What do you think?
Because they love extracurriculars. They love when you do that. They're like, oh wow, she's involved, or she, I don't know. That's just the first pronoun that came to my head.
Well-rounded.
They're involved. They're, yeah, well-rounded. They want to like they want to serve the kids ultimately, and that's what matters.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and you never know what they might call on you to do. In my first job, I was a track timekeeper, a volleyball scorekeeper, assistant wrestling coach, Odyssey of the Mind coach, and then the drama teacher needed some help with the forensics team doing all their speech things. They had to bring a judge with them to every event. So I ended up being the forensics judge that went and judged things. So you just never know what you're going to end up doing. I learned a lot of cool things while I was doing this job. But yeah, and even just the fact that I had a basic computer knowledge, like when I first started my job, I had to fill a couple of class sections to make it a full-time job. I taught elementary computer class. So this was back before we actually had like a separate computer lab they went to, because not everybody had one-to-one devices then. So, but you never know what they'll ask you to teach. If you have an extra major, like if you have a major or a minor in Spanish or something else, definitely market that too. Your references do not have to be listed on your resume. If you do have them, it's good to put them on a separate page and just have a separate references page. So again, you can organize them in alphabetical order by last name, or you can put them into categories like, here are my professional ones, here are personal references. So here's an example. Again, you could totally eliminate this if it was public and just have the city and all of that stuff on there. Your educational background, your certification. If you're not certified yet, you could put what you're expecting. So certification, state of Maryland, I forgot what the thing is, provisional certificate, I don't remember. And expected, summer 2021 or whatever. Honors and awards, you can see all this. So with teaching experience then, again, the current verbs and past tense for old jobs. And you can see different things, instructed and managed, what did you do at your position? So other related things, I directed a handbell choir, taught private lessons, all sorts of stuff like that. So any of that's great for there. If you do write a cover letter, some positions still require that. You want to make sure that you know how to write a proper business letter. So I've given you the format for one. In the Google Drive, there's a Word doc of this, so you can literally cut and paste things and just use what you need instead of having to retype everything. But if you're writing a cover letter that's in an email format, basically you're just going to ditch all this stuff on the top and start here. But make sure that you know who you're addressing. Don't assume someone's gender with something. So sometimes some people can say use dear sir or madam. Honestly though, I would just put to whom it may concern, because then you're being more inclusive for gender. If you do know the name of the person, definitely include it and make sure you know the correct title. But yeah, so basically there's a 3-paragraph format you want to follow. The first one is just a quick short paragraph. Why are you writing this person? So, hi, I'm applying for the position of blah, blah, blah that I heard about from so-and-so or whatever organization. They like to know where you heard about the job, because either if it's a person, then they can kind of ask that person about you. Or if it's somewhere where they advertise, they'd like to know which advertisements are working. So it's good for them to hear. In your second paragraph, you're going to explain why you're interested in working for this specific employer. So you want to really match your description of your skills to their job description. So when I get a ton of job applicants to look at, like 100 to look at, I have a spreadsheet and I have here all the list of things we said are required. Here are the things we want. And I literally go through and go check, check, nope, check, check, and make a spreadsheet. And then I look at how many people have the most checks. And that's how I start weeding out when there are huge amounts of applicants. So the more you can match your wording to the wording in the job description, the easier it is for them to see that you're a good fit for that. So that can be helpful there too. You definitely want to point out any of your strengths, anything that makes you a good fit for this position. And then the last paragraph, just thank them for your time. Please look at my attached materials. And then I look forward to talking with you for an interview, or if you have more questions or whatever, and provide a way for them to do that. So, your phone number, your email, any way like that. Something to think about too is set up your voicemail inbox if you don't have one, and make sure that you have a professional greeting for your voicemail. One of my friends forgot to do that and did not get a job because they're like, hey, I'm either asleep or out partying. And I was like, oh, that was not what you wanted. And she's like, I'm not getting a job from here. I was like, nope. So that was kind of funny. Again, make sure you have a signature. And if you are doing a real business name, actually sign your name or, put in a scanned signature. If it's an email, you don't need to worry about that. And this is just a sample cover letter. If you want to steal any wording for anything, you're welcome to. If not, that's okay. Your cover letter should never be more than a page. They're not going to read it. It just needs to be enough to tell them like, hey, I want to find out more about this person. So that kind of gets you going there. Okay, let's go back to here. Okay. Any questions so far? I'm kind of talking a lot more than I normally like to talk. Yeah, Jenna?
So the actful is like the Spanish praxis in a way, or more like the foreign language praxis. So like, what if I take the the ACTFL for Spanish and I get a sufficient like passing score, but like there's no formal education in like foreign language after high school, like would I still should I just still put that on there?
Yeah, definitely put that on there because it's at least showing another skill and a certification you have. And you know, if you do something extra, like well, in my class, I made everyone go be a Soundtrap level 1 certified educator. So if you have that, those are things to put in your skills, like Soundtrap certified. I'm a Google Classroom certified teacher. You can go through and do things like that. I have Kodai level 1 certification. I've done world music drumming. So anything like that you want to put in there too under like related skills or things you've done. And if you have certifications in those, then that's even better. But those are definitely something you can include too. Just makes you more marketable.
Thank you.
Yeah, in general, you probably won't want to include your high school anymore. A lot of people make the mistake of including their high school on their resume for their first job, and nobody cares anymore. The other mistake that's easy to make is that we're so used to thinking perform, ensemble, recitals, all these things, is that you tend to, some people tend to make the mistake of making their music education resume really performance heavy. It's great that you're a good performer. They're going to assume that already if you're getting a music degree. And if you're interviewing with someone who is a principal who doesn't have a music background, they don't care about any of that. So they want to see your education experience first. Now, if you're applying for a position that's not an education position and it's like a conducting position, then you're going to want to have your list of repertoire you've done, you know, groups you performed with, things like that. But education jobs aren't going to care about that. So you have to know your audience and kind of tweak things to match that. Yeah, so I already did that. Okay, so when you're doing your teaching portfolio then, there's a lot of things you want to have in there. So just making sure that you're meeting all of the requirements for, you know, generally what goes in a portfolio. I have 2 portfolios. I have a paper one, like actually here's a hard portfolio that I bring with me to job interviews because hopefully never again because I like this job and don't want to go anywhere. But sometime when we're in class and not in COVID, I'll let you look at it if you want. It can be helpful to have both a digital portfolio and just a paper copy of highlights. It's an attractive binder that you can say. You might be at a point in an interview where they'll say, can you tell me about an assessment that you've done with students? And so you could say, well, I made this rubric, or you could say, cha-ching, check out this rubric that I made for this class. And it's really easy to have just a few things in a highlights binder that you can show. Again, videos of teaching performances are great. Having your resume in there, transcripts are good to have, not required, but never hurts. If you have your teaching certificate, put a big old printout of it in there. Any past programs, pictures, articles about things you've done. So when I was starting out teaching, like my first job, I didn't have a lot of things like that. But I did make a point to try and take my mentor teacher took pictures of me teaching so that I could actually include those in there. And so there's action pictures of me like directing the jazz band or soloing with the wind ensemble, or there was a newspaper article about the Odyssey of the Mind team that I coached, or something about the choir going to, you know, state festival or whatever. So anything that you have like that, it never hurts to put and include, especially if you're doing a digital portfolio. The one you're doing for your classes is structured around those in-task standards, right? So all these different teaching skills, but it doesn't hurt to add another section with like past programs or just other things about yourself. Having letters of recommendation. So those are a little goofy. Some of the counties ask for you to provide a letter of recommendation, and others will send a link so that it's private and confidential. When I write letters of recommendation for people, I tend to want them to be confidential, not because I'm going to say something bad about you, but because when the supervisors or people doing the hiring look at letters of recommendation, if it's a confidential letter, they trust that we're saying what we really think and not trying to just make things sound nice because you can see it. So if you have the option to provide one where it's confidential, a lot of times it'll give you the choice to say confidential or not. It's better to leave it confidential. And I'm always happy to share my letter of recommendation with you, but it's usually better if it comes straight from me rather than coming from you to that, so that they see it coming, you know, right from the horse's mouth. A lot of times jobs will ask for a writing sample. Not all education jobs will. If you're going for a job in higher ed, eventually they will. But something that you could include would be something as simple as a brief like paragraph or page about your philosophy of teaching, or anything like that that you've been working on. You want to personalize it to your strengths, and definitely let your personality come through in your portfolio. So you've seen a bunch of samples in your classes already. So you've seen some that use a lot of bright colors, some that are more muted, and just, focus on letting your personality come through and make it clear and easy to read. That would be the most important thing. Oh, what time is it even? I want to make sure I'm not talking at you forever. Okay. So after you've got all this stuff prepared, you've spent forever doing your portfolio that's perfect, and your professors are giving you glowing reviews on it. Have a friend double check it. Have a friend look over everything. Oh my gosh, always have someone proofread things. Just ask Dr. Ciccone, or me too, about the times that we wrote letters and included the school name and then forgot to change the school name in the letter when we sent it to another job. Yeah, you don't get a call for those jobs when you forget to change the school name and it says somebody else. Also make sure that, this is gonna sound silly, but one of the music supervisors just put up a funny thing saying, yeah, if you're gonna type your name, make sure it's spelled correctly on your resume. And if I point out to you that it's not, and you send another one and say you fixed it and it's still wrong, I'm not going to hire you. That was not a Towson student, just for the record. But so you want to really have someone to proofread something. I know that when I look through things, I always read what I thought I wrote and I don't catch what I actually wrote sometimes. So have that person who's like your proofreader. Mine is my best friend who lives in Texas, who's a clarinet professor. And before we submit anything ever, we always proofread each other's things. And that way we make sure we don't do stupid things like apply for a school and forget to switch the name. Yeah, glad that wasn't Towson when I did that. So yeah, other things to think about with that. So with interviewing, the early bird gets the worm, but it shouldn't be too early. So you want to set up your interview as soon as possible to get into the pool. And you want to set up a pre-screening interview. A lot of the times with the school districts, usually you'll have a pre-screening interview with human resources, which is sort of to make sure you just have a pulse and will be a decent teacher, because they're not going to ask you music questions there. They might ask you something about classroom management or about just things like that are general education questions. And then usually it will go to a music supervisor or a fine arts supervisor in the smaller districts that don't have separate music supervisors. And then that music supervisor creates a list or a pool of teachers. And then when the principals at all of the schools need jobs, they contact the music supervisor and say, who have you got? Who do you think would fit? So that's how it works in most of the counties. But that said, sometimes they skip and do things out of order, especially with COVID. So one of our interns last year was expecting the do you have a pulse human resources interview. And it turned out he was interviewing with a music supervisor and it threw him off and he was not prepared for that. So you just want to make sure you know who your audience is. If you're interviewing with a music supervisor, they'll ask you some current, educational questions that are broad education questions, but they might ask you some music specific questions too. If you're interviewing with a school principal who's not a musician, you're probably going to get more things about like social emotional learning or classroom management or just general questions. So you have to kind of be prepared for all of those. The back of the packet I gave you, you have like several pages of interview questions that I gathered from Maryland administrators and supervisors and also just from other people who do hiring. So you do need to be prepared. Once in a while, you do get a job offer on the spot. And when that happened to me the first time, I was like, and I didn't know what to do. And I didn't want to offend them by saying no, or can I think about it? So I just kind of was like, So be prepared to say, even if you know it's the job you want, then like, yes, I'll take it. But if you're not sure, or if you have another job that you're about to interview for, it's okay to say, can I have a few days to think about that? And, and talk about it with my, whoever, if you need to talk about it with a significant other. So you want to just be prepared to say that. Mm-hmm. Oh, what did I put on here? Okay, cool. So preparing before the interview, you want to check the job requirements and review potential interview topics. including things related to general education trends, policies. Look at past performances of a group if you know the school where you're looking at. That can give you an idea if you can see like past performances or like programs or anything that you can find out about the school to have a general idea of what you're going to be working with. You want to research the school or the organization and the geographical area. You want to know, like, look through the website of the school, know their mission statement. And that sounds really weird. Some people just have their mission statement up there and they never really think about it at their organization, and other people actually follow it and do it. So a lot of the times I've had principals or university faculty committees interviewing, but they've said, and so how does your teaching philosophy align with our mission statement? It took one interview of me having not looked at that to find out the hard way that I needed to look at that. I was like, I don't know, but I'm going to look it up when I get home and find out. So avoid that awkward moment. The thing that helped me with that is whenever I'm auditioning or interviewing for a job, I have a little sheet of paper that I have with me that's like, here are the people that I know I'm going to be interviewing with. Here's the job description. Here's the mission statement. And that way I kind of have that set for each thing. That's easy to do if you're, sitting here and interviewing, and then you can kind of peek down at stuff as you need to while you're doing it. If you're doing it online, in person, you kind of have to have that or know it. For your interview, it's totally okay to bring a notepad with you. I have a little a leather padfolio with a notebook in it. And in it, sometimes I have the little mission statement, or I have a list of questions that I might want to ask, because when I'm under pressure, I forget what questions I want to ask. And it's also okay when you're interviewing to write down parts of the question. So if they give you a 2-part question and you're going to forget it, scribble it down real quick. And that way you can go back and look at it. I usually ask the person who is interviewing, do you mind if I write some notes on my pad while we're talking? And they always say, no problem. Education jobs. Be prepared to sight sing, play piano, and even conduct without notice. So if you're in Howard County, I can almost guarantee that Terry Aberhart is going to ask you to conduct the Star-Spangled Banner and audiating it in your head, either that or singing it. In Howard County, we've had vocal general students who were applying for jobs who've had to, yeah, piano. They got a choice. Here's 3 scores. Pick one, be able to sing the line, conduct along, and go with it. And you have to do, like, they give you 10 minutes to prep a score and go. So practice doing that on your own. And you never know what you're going to get. Montgomery County sometimes for vocal general jobs will say, what's Katie Murphy asked? The one that I think threw people before was, all right, here's an African folk song. What's a typical piano accompaniment you could play to go with that? What? So, and at first you might go, why would there be piano with an African folk song? But if you think about what of that would be sounding like, it's going to be ostinato patterns underneath, 1s and maybe 5s going a lot, or low and high sounds. So if you get something that's going like an ostinato, you're good. But you have to kind of be prepared for questions like that show up when you don't know they're coming, because they're not always going to tell you have to do that. My worst one, well, I was interviewing for a job and they said, all right, so say you're teaching a 4th grade general music class. What's a concept you teach in a song you would have them do? I've been teaching for years, and my mind blanked. I was like, I'm like, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. You're asking me to sing. So all I could think of was like, well, if I was teaching them how to sing around and working on part independence, maybe I'd have them sing Music Alone Shall Live. And then and they're like, okay, how would you do it? Let's hear it. I was like, are you kidding me? So just be prepared to back up what you say with something and be able to do what you say. Sometimes the school districts, if they know about a vacancy for a certain school ahead of time, they'll ask you to actually come in and do a sample lesson with the students or for the committee. That's really cool and also terrifying sometimes. So you want to go in, and one of the things that I found is when I go in and do this, Meredith Wood did this for her elementary job, and I think it helped get her the job too. If you are asked to come in and teach a lesson, bring a formal lesson plan and bring a copy for everyone who's watching you teach to look at, because then they go, wow, that person has their act together. It's showing that you know how to plan, and it's just like being very proactive about things. So that has always gone over well. Yeah. If you're, that's the other thing. If you're asked to teach in person, make sure that you do some modeling and don't bring things in if you're not going to use them. My worst example, I wonder why I didn't get this job. I was one of 2 finalists for an awesome middle school band job. And I was like, woohoo, I'm so excited. And it was me and a guy who had 20 some years of experience. I was like, well, we'll see how it goes. And we had to go in and teach. And everything went really well, except I brought my clarinet in to be able to model for part of the job. I put it together. It was sitting there next to me the whole time. I was so nervous. I never used my clarinet once to model for the whole time. So I brought my clarinet. It was sitting there next to me and I never used it. That looked good. So if you're going to do something like that, make sure that you actually use it. Sometimes I'll bring a toy in, like, if I know I'm going to be leading warm-ups or something, I might bring, a couple tools to play with or things to do with. Just make sure you use them. Otherwise, they're like, why did you bring that? So other things to think about. Practice answering potential interview questions out loud. So there's a very big difference between thinking about your answer and stating it. And I am the best example of that, because as you notice, I say and like and all the time, and all these little fillers while I'm thinking about things. So if I haven't thought about things ahead of time, I'm a hot mess of ums and uhs. So really think about how you want to answer that, and even practice writing them out. Talk through interview questions with a friend, record yourself and see what you look like when you're interviewing. A lot of the times, if I'm conducting, if that's part of your thing, or even doing an interview, think about, this is silly, but your appearance and your face. So I have a lot of hair, right? So when I'm conducting, I have to make sure that it's pulled back and people can see my face, because otherwise when I'm teaching, the people ahead of me see that and everyone on the side sees a bunch of hair. So even just thinking about things like that. If you're going to be performing or conducting as part of an interview or an audition, make sure you try and run through it with a live audience, even if it's with 4 friends singing on a voice part to try it out. Take advantage of opportunities for mock auditions or interviews. We do one every year for the seniors, but you can also do them through the Career Center, and they will record you and let you see yourself and what you look like. So you can see all of your little nervous habits. Are you good at making eye contact or not? All of those different things. And it's also worth doing it virtually, because a lot of interviews are happening virtually now. So you need to see, like, where am I looking at with my camera? Am I making what looks like eye contact, or am I looking off to another screen all the time? So you have to be just careful with that. Watch your body language and just the way that you're sitting. See if you have any nervous fidgeting habits. I am a fidgeter, so I have to consciously not do that when I am interviewing for things. And make sure you have a few questions ready. They're always going to ask you, do you have any questions for us? And even if you don't, you should have a question for them, because it shows that you're interested and that you've thought about it and done some homework on the position. So some other things you can think about. So things to think about for the day of the interview. As much as possible, try and be well rested. I know you're a music major, you never get any sleep. I feel that. But as much as you can, get some sleep the night before. Drink a lot of water. So when I get nervous, my mouth gets dry. I have never liked public speaking, not my thing. But it's a part of my job, and I have to do presentations to like a couple hundred people several times a year. So I learned the hard way at my first conference that I need to drink more water. My mouth got so dry that I literally could not talk 15 minutes into my presentation. Like nothing would come out, and I felt like there was a big blanket in my mouth. So make sure you drink a lot of water beforehand. Eat a good breakfast, even if you're not a breakfast eater. Do get to your interview early, even ridiculously early, because traffic is annoying around here. And you definitely don't want to be late to something, because that'll automatically take you off the list. It'll sound silly too, dress professionally, but also comfortably, and making sure your clothing is climate appropriate for where you're applying. The example, I lived in Michigan when I applied for a job in Florida when I was doing grad school interviews. I had my beautiful, like awesome suit on. I looked great. It was, when was it? January in Michigan, so it was cold there. I got to Florida in my winter weight Michigan suit, and I was dying. So I got there, and I didn't realize that the university, the classrooms and all the offices were in rooms, but there was like no hallway or building. So I had to stand outside in my big heavy suit in really hot weather, sweating like crazy. And then when I got into interview with the committee, the air conditioning was broken in the office. So not only did that happen, I was sunburned because I didn't think of Florida, but I also was sweaty, and they're like, oh, you should take your jacket off. And I was like, oh no, I'm fine. And I couldn't take my jacket off because I had worn like a camisole tank top thing that had like thin straps, and that was not appropriate to take off for a job interview. So finally they're like, you look really red in the face. Do you think you can take your jacket off? I was like, I can't, my shirt is not appropriate. And I had to tell them that. How did I still get a fellowship there? I don't know. But just make sure you're dressed in layers, because some buildings are really hot and some are really cold, and you never know what you're gonna get. It's okay to let the interviewers know if you have other job prospects. I mean, you don't want to be obnoxious about it, but they might ask, have you applied anywhere else? Or you might say, I have some applications in other places, or maybe if you have a job offer, I have a job offer in another county, but I'm really interested in this. Do you know when you'll be making a decision about this? And it's okay to do that. The biggest thing to remember with the interview, as much as possible, is to relax and have fun, because it's not just them interviewing you, you're interviewing them too. And it needs to be a good fit both ways. The other thing too is that people want to work with somebody that they like. So if you're like uptight and nervous the whole time, let your personality come through. I'm goofy and I'm clumsy, and that definitely came through in my Towson interview. When I interviewed here, I had an allergic reaction to something, and it was a 2 12-hour interview days straight, like a 4-day interview process for this job. And into dinner on the first night, my hands were so swollen. I just wasn't used to like Maryland pollen, I guess, but I went like this and my fingers were still touching. And Lenita was like, are you okay? And I was just like, eyes puffed, whole face swollen shut. And they're like, we're going to dinner. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm great. And so she's like, why don't we stop and get you some Benadryl? So we ended up going for Benadryl in my interview and then continuing to dinner. So we kind of laugh about it now, but I guess the point of that is you can have a not perfect interview. And if you still seem, other than snotty and gross, but if you seem like you know what you're doing and competent, and they like your personality, you will still get the job. Now, if I'd been a hot mess and an allergy-tastic mess, who knows what would have happened, but that's all good. So the perfect interview might not always look perfect. After the interview, not everyone agrees with this, but I always send a handwritten thank you note. Now in COVID times, when we're not going physically to buildings, send an email. But if you can, it's really great to send a handwritten note to the person you interview with or people, because one, it shows that you put the thought into doing things. Two, it's a visual reminder. Like if I get an email from someone saying, thank you, blah, 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 I'm like, oh, that's nice. And then I never look at it again. It's like in my email inbox and gone. But if I get a card from somebody, like, here's one here, I save them and I look at this and think of the person who wrote me the card. So you want to have that visual reminder as much as you can, just showing that you are thoughtful and also, what's going on. I tend to write the thank you note. I'm a little bit psycho, but I write the thank you note either right when I get home, or sometimes I even write when I get to the car. I scribble out a couple notes of something specific about the interview or about the school that I really liked. And that way I mention, thank you for this. I really appreciated XYZ at this. And that way you can make it really personal. And then it's hard not to worry about them, but you just have to move on to the next thing. So whatever happens, happens, right? Then you have to make a decision. So I'm not going to lie, you get a lot of job rejects, which can be frustrating, but it's also a good learning opportunity. If you get a chance to interview for a job and there's one that you really, really want, try and interview 1 or 2 places that aren't the one you really, really want before that, so that your first interview is not for the job you really want. Because if you're nervous or like you get unexpected questions, you want to get that out of your system before you go for the one you really want. But just remember, after you've interviewed, go check out the position more after you've had a chance to ask some questions. Really think about if it's a good fit for you. I had some jobs that offered me positions and I decided not to take them, even though I didn't have another job, and that was terrifying, but I didn't feel like it was the best fit for me. And then there was one job where I was like, oh, I nailed it, I'm going to get this. And then I didn't even make it to the next round. I'm like, all right, well, I guess that wasn't a good fit either. So, it's kind of like a date. You go and you try one out and see how it works. And if you both agree, you get another one. But if you decide not to accept the position, don't ghost the people you interviewed with. Still write them and thank them for their time. mention something positive about it. I had an interview for a vocal general position in Michigan that was, they didn't advertise that it was half-time. They just talked about the position. So I got there, interviewed, they were ready to offer me the job. They're like, oh, by the way, it's a half-time position. I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Maybe I could make that work and find another half-time position. And then they're like, oh, and by the way, it's a half-time position where you have 1 week on working 5 days and 1 week off where you don't work at all. And I was like, really? I drove 5 hours to interview for that? So, but I still took the time to interview them. I mean, to write them a thank you note and say something, even though there was no way I was taking that job. So yeah. And again, you want to say, even though I'm not interested at this time, please, I hope you'll consider me in the future. A lot of the times, music supervisors, principals, they change schools. So someone that you've interviewed with that you might not take the position for could be your boss in the future. We've had a lot of the music supervisors in the past 9 years, at least 6 or 7 have switched counties. So you want to make sure you're not burning bridges. Oh yeah. And BCPS is funny. Oh wait, now I'm starting to see some questions here. Ballpark average, how many schools? Oh, how many schools do people interview for? It depends. So with each of the counties, everyone does it differently. A lot of the time you'll get put into a teacher pool, either by going through HR or the music supervisor. Once in a while though, you'll go to the principal first and then go through an interview with the music supervisor, which is kind of backwards. Vince Sandroni did that though. He knew he wanted his job at Cockeysville Middle School and he knew there was going to be an opening. So he started going to the concerts in the spring and he was there all the time and he contacted the principal and said, I'm really interested in this job. So he basically stalked and he ended up getting the job. So you have to be careful with that, balance your stalking. But yeah, it just depends on the county. Everybody has a different way that they do things. In terms of, oh yeah. For the most part, usually you'll go through a music supervisor first. Some of the other, like the city has a fine arts supervisor. Some of the other counties like Washington County have an arts supervisor that may or may not be a music person. So it just kind of depends on which county you're at. Other things to think about, you just gotta keep moving. It's easy to think like, oh, I'm graduating May, I'm gonna have a job in May and that's gonna be great. That's not what really happens for most people. It's really a kind of curvy path. And so when you're interviewing for education jobs, especially, school budgets run July through the end of June. So a lot of times teachers aren't required to resign until May. And then if there are positions open, they fill internally first, and then they become public. And a lot of the times that also depends on what's available. So they get their funding July 1st. How many students do we have? How much money do I have? That might determine how many music teachers they need at a school. So it's very normal to get hired in July and even August. And that's normal. And it's nerve-wracking when you really want a job. But you just have to know that it's going to be coming. One year we had Baltimore County is one of the slowest counties, and a lot of students from Towson want to work there because they're in the area. They take forever to hire people, and the other counties have figured that out. So like Anne Arundel, Montgomery, Howard, they're going to start snapping up interns who have graduated. And then Baltimore County, if you really want to work in Baltimore County, they just take longer. So you have to be willing to wait. So you have to decide what's worth the wait for you. Are you willing to wait for a job that you really want, or are you going to take one that you don't want? And when you're thinking about that, Maryland has a weird tenure system. So you have to work 3 years and 1 day at a school to get tenure. So really, when you take your first job, if it's a full-time job, you're making a 4-year commitment to that job. So don't take a job that you don't think you want just so you have a job if you're not willing to spend 4 years there. If you take a part-time job, you can transfer to another school, but if you take a full-time job, you would have to switch to a different county. You can't just switch to another full-time job until you've been tenured. So something to think about there. I give you a bunch of interview questions at the back of your packet that are hopefully helpful for you as you're preparing things. And if you have any questions, happy to answer them. Kind of talked a little bit too long, sorry.
You're all good. This was so informative. Thank you so much. I do have one question. I'm really interested in teaching in DC, like Washington, DC. Do you know what the reciprocity is with like certification and praxis?
Yeah, there's a really good website that I put a link to it in your handout somewhere, but let me pull it up here. There it is. And then I should remember to share so you can actually see what I'm showing you. There we go. So there's a link to this in your handout, but you can go through and look state by state. Maryland certification is taken in almost every state, but you might have to do like an extra class in certain spots. So if you want to look for Washington, D.C. Oh, there you go. So you're good there with the regionally accredited state approved teacher ed program. You've got that. Basic skills, content and pedagogy exams, you'll have that. Teaching license, equivalent to DC level 2. So we're pretty much there. What is this little category? Oh, it'd be nice if they put headers more often than just at the top. Wow, that's a long list of state by state. All right, temporary certificate offered. No. All right, so that's what we're looking for. So the best way, if you know there's a certain state you want to look at, is to go find their State Department of Education website, and then you can look at what exactly they require. Basically, almost everybody takes the praxis test. It's just a matter of some states have higher or lower scores for what they accept. So yeah, and EdTPA is your other part. That's going to be a big thing too. Yeah. Any other questions?
Can I take a picture in like 4 seconds?
For the Instagram.
My hair.
Oh, she's fixing her hair. Okay. Oh, there you go. Cool.
Okay, awesome. Yay. Well, if you need help with anything, I'm happy to look at resumes, and we'll make you write them later on anyway. But definitely submit them through the Career Center too, and they'll give you feedback and be really helpful. Oh.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was very helpful and informative.
Yeah. And Rachel, I put a link to Google Drive documents for anybody who wants them. There it is again, in case you want them. Yeah, so that way you can like not have to retype everything in some of the documents that you got. Yay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. It's nice to see you all.
You as well.
Nice to see you all too. See you tomorrow.
Yes. I'm going to go see what Emma's up to because I hear a lot of noises out there. All right. Have a good night.
You as well.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.